The Draconian Armada. It started with a tremor not in the ground but in the sky. People across the globe looked up as thunder cracked from a cloudless heaven, the kind that makes dogs howl and birds fall silent. In the deserts of Nevada, satellites blacked out. In the oceans, submarines lost contact. And in orbit, the International Space Station caught a glimpse of something impossible, a fleet. Not just a few ships, not like in the movies. Hundreds, no, thousands of massive reptilian warships shaped like the spines of dragons, drifting in formation like a floating death ritual. They didn't come with a warning or message, no demands, no contact. They just hovered. Governments scrambled to respond. Fighter jets scrambled only to vanish as they approached the coordinates. The ships were not attacking, not yet, but the threat was real and everyone knew it. They were called the Draconian Armada, and their legend had drifted between distant galaxies like the whisper of a plague. Stories told in fear of planets burned, civilizations wiped, populations enslaved. The Draconians were apex predators of the cosmos, old, merciless. They believed in strength through domination, and Earth was just next on their list. But Earth wasn't ready, not by a long shot. Humans were still fighting over politics, religion, oil, still dividing each other by color and border. The only uniting factor now was the terror in the sky. Dr. Amara Khalid, a Pakistani-American zonolinguist at MIT, was one of the first to receive the footage from the ISS. Her hands trembled as she watched it loop, scale-like ships covering the clouds, casting shadows over cities. "This isn't just an invasion," she whispered. "It's a statement." Military leaders in Washington, Beijing, and Moscow began calling emergency summits. But as they squabbled and argued protocol, something stranger happened. The ships began to fall. One by one, the mighty warships crashed silently without a single shot fired. No weapons discharged, no resistance from the skis. They dropped into deserts, oceans, forests like silent corpses. And when recovery teams finally reached them, empty, every single ship. No crew, no bodies, not even bones. The ships were intact, engines still humming, lights blinking as if expecting someone to return. But the Draconians were simply gone, vanished. Ma was sent to Nevada, where one of the largest flagships had plummeted into a remote part of the desert, leaving a 50-mile crater. Even before she arrived, the site was crawling with soldiers, engineers, and scientists. No one had any explanation. "They were here," a young sergeant told her, "but they're not now. We didn't do anything. They just disappeared." Some called it divine intervention, others feared it was a trap. The truth, though, began to unfold in ways no one was ready for. In the deep corners of the ship, hidden beneath layers of alien tech and synthetic bone-like architecture, Ma and her team found symbols. Not just glyphs, words, translations, a warning. Humanity is a contamination, a paradox, evolution fueled by emotion. We could not consume it, we could not survive it. They left behind journals not of conquest but of confusion. Observations about human behavior, war, love, sacrifice, spite, the illogical power of revenge, the lunacy of forgiveness, things that made no tactical sense, things that made the Draconians sick. They tried to absorb us like they had with other worlds, tried to overwrite human minds, possess human bodies, but Earth wasn't like the others. Something here poisoned them. And now the stars were silent across the galaxy as word spread of the Draconian defeat, not by force but by something within humanity. A strange, uneasy fear settled across alien empires, the kind of fear that made ancient warlords pause and tyrants think twice. Because Earth didn't win by fighting, it survived by being too human to be conquered. And something about that scared the hell out of the universe. The days that followed were unlike anything Maya had ever lived through. The world should have celebrated. Humanity had just dodged annihilation by a cosmic war machine, but instead the mood was haunted not just globally but personally. People started looking inward. Why did the Draconians vanish? What exactly did they mean by contamination? Ma couldn't sleep. She stared at the glyphs on her tablet every night trying to decode more of the Draconian logs. The language was brutal, harsh in form and thought. It described Earth like an infection, a biological riddle that unraveled everything they stood for. And then came the reports. First from Brazil, a team of researchers investigating a grounded Draconian skiff near the Amazon basin all went missing. No distress call, just gone. Then in Siberia, another site. Russian troops stationed near the wreck of a Draconian freighter started showing erratic behavior. Some refused to speak. Others became violently paranoid. Two soldiers reportedly ripped out their own eyes, muttering about the human essence leaking in. Ma was flown to Russia the next day alongside a newly formed multinational unit, scientists, military analysts, even a theologian from the Vatican. They didn't know what they were dealing with anymore, not just alien tech, something deeper. Psychological, possibly metaphysical. The Siberian site was cold, brutal. The ship had half melted into the permafrost but still pulsed with life. Inside, the air felt too thick. The walls whispered not with sound but with presence, the way a house feels haunted before anything actually moves. She walked into what looked like a command chamber. The walls shimmered with black scales that seemed to breathe. Her translator began decoding another segment. They lie without lying, kill without hatred, love with madness. These creatures are not conquerable. They infect. They unravel logic with chaos. We entered their world and were undone by something we could not program, instinct tethered to contradiction. Ma's heart pounded. The Draconians didn't just fear humans, they couldn't comprehend them. And maybe that's what made them disappear. Dr. Kullad, a soldier called from another chamber. You need to see this. She followed him to a darkened room lined with glowing pods. Inside each was a human, at least they looked human. Their bodies were pale, eerily still, suspended in thick blue fluid, but their eyes were open, watching, unblinking. They're not from here, the soldier whispered. DNA is not human, not exactly. Clone attempts failed replications. The Draconians had tried to make humans to study or infiltrate, but something went wrong. The bodies weren't decomposing, they were waiting. Waiting for what? A voice behind them, calm, hollow, spoke in perfect English. You shouldn't have entered. Everyone spun. One of the pods was empty and now a figure stood in the doorway. Male, middle-aged, wearing a loose-fitting jumpsuit barefoot, he looked human. He wasn't. His eyes glowed faintly gold, not like a reflection, like a fire just behind his pupils. We didn't vanish, he said, we were consumed. The room stood frozen. I was the last to resist, they left me as a warning. Ma stepped forward. You're Draconian? Was, but not anymore, his smile was hollow. You broke us not with strength but with contradiction. You love what you destroy what you worship, you create without order. We became you and that is worse than death. The lights flickered and just like that he was gone, not vanished in the sci-fi sense. He just walked out calmly, slowly into the Siberian cold. When the guards chased after him, they found only footprints leading into the forest, then stopping completely as if the earth had swallowed him whole. Back in Washington, a decision was made. The world couldn't know. The Draconian wreckage was to be buried, hidden from the public. The official story, atmospheric phenomena, a meteor shower, Cold War-era satellites falling back to Earth, anything but the truth. But Ma knew something that kept her up even more now. The Draconians didn't vanish into dust. They became human in some way, not just in body, in thought. And the universe was now watching Earth, not as prey but as contagion. It didn't stay hidden for long. 2 weeks after the Siberian incident, a leaked satellite image hit the dark net, a clear aerial shot of a Draconian cruiser half-submerged in the South Pacific. No one believed the meteor crash excuse anymore. Forums lit up. Conspiracy theorists exploded. Former military whistleblowers began to step forward, some terrified, some angry, some dead within days of speaking out. And all across the world, a strange trend began. People were changing. It started subtle, emotional disturbances, rage fits in peaceful individuals, hyperempathy in others. A growing number of people began reporting vivid dreams of strange places, alien landscapes, giant dragon-like ships drifting through blood-colored skis, and always a voice whispering, "We see you now." Mira kept her head down, but her inbox was a battlefield. Military brass demanding her silence, private research groups offering her millions, and strangers begging her to explain what was happening to them. The Vatican's representative, Father Armand, called her at 3:00 a.m. one night. He sounded terrified. There is something in the Vatican archives, he said. A prophecy, ancient, written before Christ. It speaks of creatures from beyond the stars, those who devour without teeth, who burn without flame. And it ends with this, the beast shall enter man and the heavens shall close their eyes. She didn't know what disturbed her more, the prophecy or the fact that she wasn't surprised anymore. Then came the New York incident. It was a quiet Sunday morning when it happened, Times Square filled with tourists. At 10:43 a.m., dozens of people stopped moving, just froze mid-stride, their eyes rolled back. Then in unison they began to scream in a language no human had ever spoken, Draconian. It lasted 4 minutes, 46 people collapsed, 13 died from brain hemorrhages, and the only one who survived conscious was a boy 9 years old. Name, Matteo Lin, born in Queens, no history of trauma, disease, or mental instability. When Mira was brought in to interview him, he was quiet, calm, too calm. She leaned forward. Matteo, do you know why you're here? He looked at her with those deep brown eyes, and something behind them didn't belong. Because you're not ready, he said. Ready for what? He smiled to become what they saw in you. She felt the chill crawl down her spine. Mira stepped out of the room and called her colleague from the Siberian mission, Dr. Hassan Nuasu, who was now stationed at the African Union's new alien research bunker in Nigeria. He didn't sound surprised by the incident. In fact, he sounded resigned. You think this is the first? He asked. There have been over 60 similar events globally, some covered up, some not. You're saying the Draconians infected us? No, Hassan replied. Worse, they tried to become us and failed, but something stayed behind, something half them, half us, and now it's waking up. Governments began pulling strings in secret. A coalition was formed, unofficial, cross-border, off-grid, the Eclipse Protocol. Mira was drafted in as lead translator and cultural theorist. The goal, track, isolate, and understand any human showing signs of draconian residue. But even Mira wasn't prepared for what she found next. One of the victims of the New York incident, a man named Philip Connors, had survived but entered a coma. His brain scans showed activity patterns unlike anything recorded before, erratic, non-human neural webs. But that wasn't the real discovery. Inside his bloodstream were nanostructures, organic metallic compounds of draconian origin. Alive, replicating, not killing him, rewriting him. They weren't infecting humanity to destroy it. They were turning humanity into something else. A bridge. And if that was true, the Draconians might not have vanished at all. They might be watching through our eyes. The first confirmed transformation happened in Lagos. A woman named Amaka Oundle, 32 years old, an accountant with no military or scientific background, collapsed in the middle of her office. By the time paramedics arrived, her skin was seared with glowing lines deep beneath the flesh, like something underneath had turned her veins into circuits. Her coworkers swore her eyes lit up white as she screamed in a voice that shook the glass windows, the same phrase, the same language, Draconian. By the time the Eclipse Protocol had reached the scene, Amaka was already gone. Her body wasn't missing. It was there, but it wasn't her anymore. Blood samples turned up the same nanostructures Mira had seen in New York. The team isolated a strange pattern in the cells, something that looked like a bootloader, as if a code was being activated. Slowly, patiently. Mira stood in the Eclipse HQ, which had now been moved underground to a reinforced facility in Greenland, the only place deemed clean after a full orbital sweep. Screens lined the wall, maps glowing red across different cities, reports stacking in every hour. She stared at the largest map, a global overlay that tracked behavioral spikes. 53 confirmed, said General Varga, the Eclipse commander. His face was pale, his hands shaking despite the layers of cold steel in his voice. 24 suspected. Spread is accelerating. But how? Mira asked. We haven't been attacked, no energy weapons, no armies. They didn't even launch a real invasion. They didn't need to, he replied. You said it yourself, they failed to conquer us because of something they couldn't process, our contradiction. But what if they found a workaround? Mira turned towards the glass chamber behind her, where Philip Connors was still hooked to machines. His eyes fluttered now when someone spoke Draconian near him, as if the language itself activated something deeper. They're hijacking the human soul, she whispered. What? Not literally, but close. They're rewriting instinct, merging logic and chaos, turning humans into hosts for a cognitive hybrid, part human, part draconian. Why? She hesitated, then finally said what she'd feared all along. Because they need us. Because whatever they saw in us, love, madness, contradiction, it terrified them, but it also fascinated them. And now they're trying to become us, but better, stronger. Father Arman stepped into the room just then, holding a thin, ancient parchment, his expression tight with dread. You need to see this. The scroll he unrolled looked more like something out of a myth than science, until Mira saw the symbols. Not quite draconian, but close. Babylonian, she said slowly. No, pre-Babylonian, Sumerian maybe. He nodded, We found this buried in the Vatican's forbidden archive. It talks of the sky serpents, beings from the black flame who tried to steal man's soul. But the soul was corrupted, infected with paradox. It broke them. Mira touched the scroll. This isn't prophecy, it's memory, a warning from a civilization before us, maybe even before written history. She looked up at the room. The eclipse symbol flashed on every screen. New reports from Australia, Norway, and Kenya, more transformations, more disappearances, more people waking up speaking in a voice not their own. They're not invading us, she said. They're incubating, preparing us for something, or maybe preparing themselves through us. And then, as if in agreement, the chamber behind her went dark. Philip Connor's vitals flatlined. For a second, everyone froze. Then the lights exploded. Mira was thrown back, shards of glass rained across the room, screams echoed, security flooded in. But it wasn't Philip lying in that chamber anymore. It was something else, tall, reptilian human, alien, scaled skin under a human skeleton. Golden eyes glowing like fire in a cave, and it looked directly at Mira as if it had known her forever. I am the first, it said. Its voice was all of them, male, female, alien, child. The bridge is complete, the stars are watching. And then it vanished in a pulse of energy that shorted every system in the facility. All across the sky that night, strange lights danced across Earth's atmosphere. The stars weren't just watching, they were reacting. 2 hours after the escape, the entire Eclipse facility was in lockdown. Backup generators groaned to life, flickering with unstable power. No one knew what that thing had done before it vanished, but whatever it was, it left a psychic scar behind. Soldiers stood tense in corridors, fingers on triggers. Scientists whispered of hallucinations, voices from nowhere. Some were weeping, others smiling for no reason at all. Mira sat slumped in the debriefing room, blood drying on her temple from the explosion. She held the ancient parchment in her lap, fingers tracing the faded symbols like a prayer. The words burned in her mind now: the beast shall enter man and the heavens shall close their eyes. She looked up as General Varga and Father Armand entered. Behind them came Dr. Hassan, face pale as bone, dragging a rolling screen covered in real-time data. They're calling it the Ascension phenomenon, Hassan said quietly. We've confirmed 7 more emergences in the last 90 minutes. No patterns, no common genetic markers. It's like it's choosing at random. No, Mira said, not random. It's choosing humans who have already broken somehow. What do you mean? Asked Armand. Mira stood, voice low. The contradictions. It's always been about the contradictions. Love twisted by betrayal, hope strangled by grief. These people, Amaka, Philip, the boy in New York, they weren't just ordinary. They were fractured, torn. And somehow the draconian residue used that as a door. She paused. No, not a door, a womb. The room went silent. Varga rubbed his face like he was trying to wipe the whole reality off it. What are we dealing with here, doctor? You need to speak plainly. Mira swallowed hard. They failed to overwrite us directly, so they left fragments, biological, mental, maybe even psychic, in the wreckage. Seeds. And now those seeds are growing inside people, using our own emotions, our damage, as nutrients. So these creatures, Varga asked, they're what, hybrids? No, Hassan said before Mira could speak. They're new life forms, not human, not draconian, something post-human. The next evolutionary step, but not chosen by nature, chosen by invasion. Father Armand looked like he was going to be sick, and it's spreading. Mira nodded fast. Hassan turned on the screen behind him. We've compiled every incident and laid them over a star chart. The map glowed. At first, Mira didn't get it. Then it hit her like a stone to the chest. The emergences on Earth were forming a constellation, and not just any. The Draconian sigil, a shape mirrored in their ships, their language, even their DNA helix markers. It wasn't a map of infection, it was a beacon. They're sending a signal, Mira whispered, a message to the stars. Varga cursed under his breath. To what? Reinforcements. No, said Hassan grimly. To others, whoever else they failed to conquer, whoever else might be listening, or worse. To warn them or invite them. Mira stared at the glowing pattern, stomach turning. It's not about Earth anymore, it never was. Earth was just the first place they couldn't assimilate, the first place where the infection took root instead of dying. That scared them, so now they're watching us. Father Armand backed away. The heavens closing their eyes, maybe not out of horror, maybe out of fear. Because if the Draconians couldn't control us and now we're merging into something new, something they accidentally created, then maybe humanity was no longer the virus. Maybe we were the plague. Suddenly sirens blared again, another breach, this one in Antarctica. The camera feed sputtered to life. Snow blew across a dark mountain range. In the middle, a figure stood barefoot in the cold, wearing only a tattered hospital gown. Human until it looked up, eyes glowing gold. And behind it the snow parted like mist, something enormous shifted, scaled, breathing, a draconian war beast, alive, kneeling before the human form. The feed cut out, and the silence that followed wasn't just silence. It was awe, dread, worship. The stars weren't holding their breath anymore, they were bowing. The Antarctic breach changed everything, not just for Eclipse, but for every government, every scientist, every religious leader still clinging to their old understanding of the world. For months, they'd all operated under a single terrifying assumption, that humanity had been infected, overtaken, transformed. But now it looked like humanity was ascending. And the universe was nailing to it. The footage leaked within 6 hours despite Eclipse's best efforts to scrub it. It spread like wildfire. A human figure standing in the center of an Arctic storm, calm and barefoot, while a creature large enough to crush tanks bowed its massive, scaled head in submission. That image tore through the world, and people responded in two terrifyingly different ways. Some panicked, governments activated sleeper protocols. Emergency shelters were stocked, underground bunkers lit up. Religious cults declared it the apocalypse and began ritual suicides. Wall Street crashed, riots bloomed like cancer in cities already cracking under stress. But others fell to their knees. They called it the becoming, the moment humanity stopped being what it was, flawed, fractured, primitive, and became something more. Online forums turned into congregations. People began offering themselves to the ascension, standing in freezing weather, starving themselves, whispering in tongues they didn't understand, begging for the gods within to awaken. Mira watched it all from Eclipse Command, her eyes sunken and red, her voice hollow from exhaustion. "This isn't just contagion," she said. "It's belief now, voluntary infection, they want it." General Varga leaned against the reinforced glass wall, face pale and gaunt. "We've lost the narrative." "No," Hassan said grimly, "we've lost control of the species." They'd been monitoring dozens of emergence sites, but after Antarctica, the pattern changed. No more randomness. The beacons were activating in sequence now, each one lighting up like a step in a cosmic ritual, and when 5 were lit, something began to form in orbit. Not a ship, not yet, but a structure, a massive lattice of energy stretching in the upper atmosphere, cloaked to satellites but visible to specialized infrared. It wasn't built by humans, not even by draconian standards. It was being grown. The working theory, a cocoon. Earth itself was becoming the birthing chamber for something new, a hybrid consciousness, a post-human entity. And it had a timeline, 13 beacons, 13 emergence points. The 6th had just awakened in Nairobi. Mira stood over the holographic projection, arms crossed. "If we let this finish, we won't be human anymore, not in body, not in thought. Whatever they're creating, it'll think like us, but it won't be us." Hassan frowned. "You're assuming that's a bad thing." She turned sharply. "Think about it," he cut in. "War, greed, hatred. We destroy ourselves faster than any alien could. Maybe this change is evolution finally forcing us to grow up. By losing what makes us human. Maybe we already lost it. Maybe the Draconians saw it clearer than we ever did, and maybe that's why they couldn't survive it." Varga banged his fist on the table. "Enough. We're not here to debate philosophy. We need to stop that thing in orbit before it finishes whatever the hell it's doing." Mira stared at the star map again. She knew what was coming. 13 emergence points, 13 awakenings, 13 vessels to carry whatever this new humanity was going to be. She exhaled. "We have to go back to the source, the crash sites, no, the one that never crashed, the flagship in Nevada, the one that fell first. It's where all this started. If there's a fail-safe, any way to stop this, it'll be buried in there." They launched the operation under the cover of darkness. 3 helicopters, 1 containment transport, 24 Eclipse operatives, Mira, Hassan, and Armand on board. As the Nevada desert loomed beneath them, Mira felt her pulse tighten. She could feel it now, all of it, like a low hum in her bones. The awakening wasn't just happening around her. It was whispering to her, calling her by name. The Nevada desert stretched beneath them like the scorched skin of a dying world. Nothing moved for miles except the wind whipping up sand around blackened craters and the massive, silent corpse of the Draconian flagship, half buried in red dust. It loomed like a fossilized god. The Eclipse convoy landed a full mile out. No one trusted going any closer until the perimeter was scanned again. The last time they'd breached this wreck, no one understood what they were really dealing with. Now they knew better. Mira stepped off the transport first, the wind clawing at her coat, grit stinging her cheeks. The air tasted different here, too still, like a breath held too long. Armin stood beside her, crossing himself silently. "Feels like a grave," he muttered. "No," Mira said, "a womb." Hassan joined them with a SAT case already glowing. Thermal readings inside the ship arising, same pattern as the emergence points. Something's waking up in there. The Eclipse squad moved in tight formation towards the ship's entrance, now half-collapsed under rust-colored rock. The metallic ribs of the hull jutted up like claws as they breached the threshold. Lights flickered to life deep inside, faintly green, pulsing like heartbeats. Ma felt it immediately, a pressure behind her eyes, a memory that wasn't hers. She stumbled forward, then straightened. "I know this corridor." Vugga turned sharply. "You've never been this deep inside." "I don't need to," she said hollowly. "It's in me." The ship was no longer just a relic, it was communing with her. As they reached the inner sanctum, a spiraling chamber with a high dome ceiling, they found what they hadn't seen before, not during the first breach, not on any scans. A throne, not a seat, not a control panel. A throne grown from black organic material, scaled, twisting, carved with symbols that bled light. And sitting atop it was a body, or what was left of one. It was human mostly. Dried skin stretched over bone, hair long gone, eyes empty, but the skull was elongated, the arms unnaturally long, the fingers split into three. A perfect midpoint between human and draconian. Ma stepped forward, her voice cracking. "My God, it was a prototype." "The first?" Vugga asked. She turned slowly, eyes wide. "The first of us." The body stirred, everyone froze, it didn't breathe, it didn't blink, but its head tilted just slightly toward Ma. The voice wasn't spoken aloud, it was inside them. "You have come to claim your inheritance." Vugga raised his rifle, "Back the hell off." Ma didn't move, her heart thundered. "You're the seed," she whispered. "I was the failed one," it answered. "The first to carry the weight of your chaos. I broke, but I carried the code forward in silence, in decay, until the others arrived. And now they are blooming. The 13 shall rise, you are the 13th. "No," she breathed, "that's not possible." But the truth slid into her like a knife of light. The whispers, the dreams, the fluency she had with draconian language, the way the ships responded to her, the pull toward this moment. She wasn't studying the emergence, she was one. Umund backed away in horror. "She's the final vessel." Hassan looked at her not with fear but awe. "Ma, you've been chosen since the beginning." The throne pulsed, the ship groaned around them, and Maya felt herself changing, not physically, not yet, but her thoughts widened, stretched. She could feel the other 12 across the globe, their minds like distant fires waiting for her. She could also feel them, the stars watching, silent, terrified, not of war but of what Earth had become. What she had become. "I can stop it," she said suddenly. Everyone stared. "I can shut down the signal, collapse the emergence grid, but only from within." Vugga raised his weapon. "I'm not letting you walk into that throne and finish whatever they started." "You don't have a choice," she said softly. "It's already inside me." Hassan stepped forward, placing a trembling hand on her shoulder. "You can still come back." She looked him dead in the eyes. "I don't know." And then she said. The throne didn't resist, it welcomed her. The chamber exploded in light. And in orbit, the growing cocoon flickered, paused, and something looked back. She didn't scream. She expected pain, expected her body to twist, to tear apart under the weight of what was awakening. But as she sank into the throne, it was like being submerged in warm water. The ship itself pulsed beneath her, humming with a rhythm that wasn't mechanical, it was biological. It was hers. Ma's eyes rolled back, and suddenly she wasn't in Nevada anymore. She wasn't even on Earth. She stood in the center of an endless black expanse, stars swirling above her like the veins of some sleeping god. And around her 12 others, not bodies, not quite human, silhouettes made of smoke and golden fire. The other vessels, the ascended 12. They all turned toward her and she understood instantly. She was the key, the final node, the 13th mind. Without her, the bridge would never be whole. Why me? She asked into the dark. The 12 answered not with words but with a collective thought that poured through her like molten glass. Because you never truly belonged to your species. You questioned, you doubted, you loved and broke and kept going. You carried contradiction like a crown. You were always the anomaly, the final mirror in which the stars would see themselves and flinch. She fell to her knees in that cosmic realm, her chest aching. I didn't want this. And yet you came. The stars above them dimmed. She looked up. Something enormous loomed at the edge of the void now, not a creature, not a ship, a civilization, a council of watchers, alien empires that had long outlived their home worlds, titans of reason and logic. And all of them had turned their gaze toward Earth, waiting to see if the Draconians' failed invasion had birthed a mistake or a monster. Ma stood again, not as a woman anymore, but as something vast and infinite. Her mind was spread across the planet, across the orbiting cocoon, inside every awakening soul. She felt humanity, not just their actions but their core. She felt the man kissing his dying wife in a hospital, the child stealing food to feed her brother, the soldier weeping for friends he'd killed, the mother giving birth while the world ended outside. And she understood what the Draconians had seen, what had terrified them, what had destroyed them, and what the watching stars feared most. Humanity wasn't a virus, it was a singularity, a place where reason broke, where paradox lived, where love and hate could exist in the same breath, where contradiction wasn't weakness, it was power. In that moment, Ma made her choice, not for Earth, not for the stars, but for the unknowable chaos that made being human worth the pain. The 13 vessels ignited as one, the cocoon in orbit shattered, and across the universe, the watching civilizations saw something impossible unfold. Not an ending, not a new species, not a victory or a defeat, a question, answered with a question, contradicting itself into infinity. Ma opened her eyes back in the throne room. Hassan was kneeling before her, his face streaked with tears. Behind him, Vugga looked ashen, his weapon lowered. Umund was praying. She stood from the throne, feeling both heavier and lighter than she ever had. The other 12 vessels across the planet were doing the same, stepping back from the precipice, choosing to remain in the contradiction. It's done, she said, we chose. What? Hassan asked, what did we choose? Ma smiled a tired human smile. To stay broken, to stay imperfect, to stay us. In orbit, the cocoon dissolved into dust, each particle carrying a message to the stars, a warning and an invitation. We are humans, we are contradiction, and we are not afraid. In the months that followed what would later be called the Ascension Crisis, Earth struggled to find its balance. The Draconian ships remained, silent sentinels half buried in deserts and oceans, their technology slowly being integrated into human knowledge. But more importantly, humanity itself was changing, not physically, not genetically, but in understanding. The 13 vessels, Ma among them, became reluctant ambassadors to a universe suddenly aware of Earth's existence. They weren't transformed, weren't alien, but they carried something within them now, a connection to something beyond human comprehension. Dr. Hassan Nyasa established the first Zonological Institute in Lagos, studying the interface between human psychology and alien consciousness. Father Umund returned to the Vatican with scrolls and artifacts that would reshape theological debate for centuries. And General Vugga, against all military protocol, became the first advocate for peaceful extraterrestrial diplomacy. The stars were watching now, but they were watching with respect. The Draconian threat had been the first contact, but not the last. Other species, curious and cautious, began sending signals, probes, even envoys, not to conquer, but to understand what had defeated the most feared empire in the known galaxy. Ma herself retired to a small house on the coast of Maine, where the ocean reminded her of that infinite void she had glimpsed. She wrote books, gave lectures, but mostly she sat by the water, feeling the pulse of something larger than herself. She wasn't alone. The other 12 vessels were scattered across the world, a fisherman in Japan, a teacher in Brazil, a taxi driver in Egypt, all of them carrying the memory of stars in their blood. They met occasionally not to plan or conspire, but simply to remind themselves that they were still human, still wonderfully, terribly contradictory. And sometimes, on clear nights when the stars seemed especially bright, Ma would stand on her porch and look up. She couldn't hear them anymore, not directly, but she could feel their attention, their curiosity, their cautious respect. "We're still here," she would whisper to the cosmos. "Still loving what we destroy, still creating without order, still beautifully broken." And somewhere across the vast emptiness of space, countless civilizations listened. Not in fear, not in hunger, but in quiet admiration of the species that chose to remain itself rather than become something greater. The species that taught the universe that contradiction wasn't weakness. It was strength.